I'm going to take some time to go over this brochure. And for those who don't know what this is what is given to parents by DCF or CPS or whatever other name these entities, for-profit corporations, want to go by. Give to parents who have had an anonymous report of an allegation of abuse or neglect. So, as you see, it's been photocopied countless times, and it says what you need to know about a Child Protective Service assessment, and you only know that because you open it up and that's what they start talking about. The term they use is assessment. They don't use interrogation. They say they're assessing the family. You have two smiling kids on the front, one looking at you, which is a complete slap in the face for anyone going through this, because the only ones smiling are the wolves in sheep's clothing coming in, acting as if they are your friends, so that you will let your guard down and they can try to gather enough information to prove that the allegation against you is true. I want to make the point and highlight that the real issue here is that there is no due process of law occurring. All of this is being done under the color of law by a for-profit corporation that can be found on Dun and Bradstreet. They are actually the Child Predator Services cartel that's running rampantly in this wicked nation. And it's not limited just to America. It's infiltrated pretty much every country in the world and is having devastating effects. It's a complex issue, and the rabbit hole goes very, very deep. And I'm going to pretty much just stay on the surface, but try to encourage people to continue to research on their own and become aware of what's actually going on and how these entities are able to get away with what they call legal removals. Okay, again, a word game. Instead of saying state-sanctioned kidnapping, they call it a removal, and it's all based on what they call safety and protection. Everything's always under a guise, in the best interest of. So I will start first with a video clip from late Congresswoman Nancy Schaefer, who explains what's going on. And as we all know, and she will hit on this, that there are true cases of abuse and neglect out there. But the issue is that these cases are being propagated to allow these entities to move forward with increasing power, okay? And the real issue, once again, is that there's no due process in a true court of record before a jury of one's peers, which is needed for justice to be served. And all of us, in any type of actually true cases of abuse and neglect, want to make sure that justice is served. But what we have ended up with is a system that is incriminating parents, but using different language, and then violating the rights of parents and children and families and destroying them.
My name is Nancy Schaefer, and I'm from the state of Georgia in the United States. And thank you for your gracious invitation to join you tonight. And thanks to all of you who have made this incredible World Congress of Families #5 in Amsterdam possible. It's a privilege for me to join you tonight and to be with you in some pro-family policy here. I will share with you on the unlimited power of Child Protective Services. I served in the Georgia State Senate, and after 4 years of viewing the ruthless and unsparing actions of Child Protective Services, also called CPS, which I will use tonight, I wrote a scathing report entitled "The Corrupt Business of Child Protective Services." Thank you. The report cost me my Senate seat. Here's some copies of the report if you'd like to get one. However, there are causes worth losing over, and this is one. I'm going to talk about some of the problems and then some realistic, maybe, solutions for families and children, and maybe look to some steps that we can take. This is not to say that there are not those children in wretched situations who need to be removed. There are, and we all agree. But tonight, I'm talking about those children removed from their homes intentionally for profit. Children are seized unnecessarily from their families due to the federal aid created in 1974 entitled the Adoption and Safe Families Act. It offers financial incentives to the states that increase adoption numbers. To receive the adoption incentives or bonuses, local CPS must have more children. They must have more merchandise to sell. Funding is available when a child is placed in a foster home with strangers or placed in a mental health facility and medicated, usually against the parents' wishes. Parents are victimized by the system that makes a profit for holding children longer and bonuses for not returning children to their parents. This is abuse of power. It is lack of accountability. And it is a growing criminal political phenomenon spreading around the globe. Oftentimes, but not always, poor parents are targeted to lose their children because they do not have the wherewithal to hire an attorney or fight the system. Being poor and lacking proper housing does not mean your children should be removed. CPS has redefined poor to mean psychologically inferior. Therefore, it is in the best interest of the child to be removed. Best interest, of course, has also been redefined at the child's expense. It has been reported over and over that 6 times as many children die in foster care than in the general public. Once a child is legally kidnapped and placed in official safety, the child is far more likely to suffer abuse, including sexual molestation and or rape. Case workers and social workers are often guilty of fraud. They withhold and destroy evidence, and they seek wrongly to terminate parental rights while being protected by state immunity. There is a huge bureaucracy made up of judges, court-appointed attorneys, guardian ad litems, social workers, state employees, court investigators, therapists, psychologists, psychiatrists, foster parents, adoptive parents, and on, who are looking to the children in state care for their job security. Judges have control over private living arrangements and income of 48.3 million Americans. The United States Census Bureau reported in 2002 that 40 billion in transfer payments were made between households of custody parents and other parents. That money, $40 billion, is under the direction and control of family court judges in environments covered with confidentiality laws that protect the wrong people. Fathers are victims of this unjust system. Child support payments, even without having visits with their children, are choking the very life out of fathers. 3 fathers, of whom I am aware and have been in touch with, committed suicide in the last 12 months because they lost the opportunity to even visit with their children. These are crimes against humanity for financial gain. Rights are removed from parents, human rights, civil rights, and even religious rights. One illustration of what took place in my district is that after so many calls, I decided to call a meeting in one of the counties of my own district. I personally called 37 families that had been in touch with me who had all lost their children, grandchildren. I had them meet me in the library one Saturday morning. We started at 9 o'clock and we ended at 9 o'clock. We had 50 families standing outside the door that could not get in. We didn't have time to talk with them. There was incredible anguish and profound suffering from these families. Some children had been taken off the school bus, taken out of the hospitals, or taken out of their homes in the middle of the night, and even worse. It was just an incredible ordeal. These parents, trapped in the system, become like refugees. They're dazed and glazed and have no one of whom to turn. They do not know what to do, and the loss of their children is devastating. After having worked in this arena for several years, I do not believe that a single child comes out whole after having been in this system. Many foster children make up the homeless population of today.
I think that gives a good place right here to go ahead and start reading, and we will let this pamphlet go ahead and incriminate this for-profit corporation and all of their cronies, because it's all just written out right in front of you. And this is what parents have to go by. This is what late Congresswoman Nancy Schaefer was speaking about. And I say late Congresswoman Nancy Schaefer, please research what happened to her and her husband and the producer of her documentary that she was putting out to expose the deep corruption and those in seats of power who are involved. So it says here, why has DHS contacted my family? DHS has contacted your family in response to a report of suspected child abuse or neglect. Reports of child abuse may come from anyone in the community. DHS assessments will be completed with either a traditional response or an alternative response, depending on the type and severity of the abuse or neglect reported. The traditional response is for the most serious reports of child abuse and neglect. The finding of whether abuse or neglect occurred must be made. As you see here, it says a finding. It says the alternative response provides more opportunity to partner with families and communities to solve family issues related to abuse and neglect. No finding of whether abuse or neglect occurred is made, and the family is seen as experts in their own families. So in the traditional response, the state is seen as the experts in these families. Every right is removed from the families prior to any due process of law. And I say prior in the sense that if due process actually occurred. So that's one of the problems, is that due process is lacking. Now, these word games, when they use a finding of whether abuse or neglect has occurred must be made, is very profound, because the majority of these cases do not go into the corrupt criminal courts that still work under the color of law. They stay within the anti-family kangaroo courts. And so no charges, convictions, arrests, anything like that are made. And so they don't use the words innocent or guilty. What they do is they say that a finding is founded or unfounded, or as we see later, they have a middle ground where they say they are unable to determine whether abuse or neglect occurred. So this leaves room for a whole lot of abuse of power that we see in this for-profit corporation and the system that is supporting and enforcing these unlawful acts and inhumane acts against families. It's an attack on the family system. It says, let's go on. If DHS is assessing a report of child abuse, you have the right to. So this for-profit corporation is letting parents know what their rights are. Now, they're not coming in and putting this down, which is actually the supreme law of this land in America. I'm not saying it's perfect in any way. I'm not going to get into that. What I'm saying is that this land, this wicked nation, does not even follow its own laws. This is actually an ironclad contract, which means it cannot be broken. And where they, you know, these wicked, crafty people are saying there's room for interpretation, any interpretation is to be made in favor of the people, not in favor of governments and these entities. These people have been able to abuse their power because who's going to hold them accountable? So, anyways, I will go a little bit more into this later. I will state that in coming in to know Yahuwah and the truth about who his chosen people are, his Aubrey people, that so-called blacks have been oppressed more than any other people. And people will deny this, and that's fine. I'm not here to convince anyone. I'm here to encourage people to research, because when I was indoctrinated in the system and a part of this world, you know, just going along with everything, going in to get my master's degree in counseling, I did not see the oppression. I did not see the impact from all of the past and present. Wickedness flourishes because they're crafty. So it does not mean that other people are not being oppressed and haven't been oppressed in the past. What I'm saying is that there is a targeting of lower income so-called black neighborhoods. There's so much information out there about Planned Parenthoods on every street corner, and these semi-automatic and automatic guns being dropped off in ammo in alleyways in these neighborhoods. You know, it's a tactic of conquering and dividing. And this right here, Amendment 13, talks a lot about what has occurred says neither slavery nor involuntary servitude except as punishment for a crime, whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction. So they have a system set up where, you know, they say, okay, we've set the captives free. Yeah, everyone's free, right, in America today. So-called blacks are free. That's what this is talking about right here. Well, no. They have an exception here. If there's a punishment for a crime, okay, and you're duly convicted. So how many so-called blacks are in the prison system today? Is it disproportionately made up of so-called blacks? And why is that? And after, you know, looking at what's going on in the neighborhoods, Flint water crisis, all of these other types, police shootings and everything else that's going on, okay, the rabbit hole goes deep. And if you go on to Amendment 14, which there is a whole lot of information out there and about whether it was ratified or not and how corrupt it is about the people. You know, they use all this legalese, and they say privileges instead of rights, and on and on and on. So, yeah, talking about jurisdiction, and yeah, so there's so much that's happened that, and unlawful executive orders, and the breaking of contracts, you know, that can't be broken by these wicked people that is allowing them to come in and kidnap children. And we'll go on to the next part, or continue on in the next part about what they say your rights are. It says you have a right to be treated with dignity and respect, free from discrimination. I, for one, would like to know what their definition of dignity and respect is, and what it would look like to be free from discrimination, because that's hypocrisy. That's not what happens. You know, besides them coming in, trying to act like your friend, the minute you invoke your rights and just try to protect your children, if you question them in any way, everything's flipped around and turned against you. They have plans A through Z and probably more, and they know what they're doing and how to deal with people depending on, you know, people's reactions. So it's very tightly knit together and well oiled. It says you have a right to communicate with DHS as a caseworker in your first native language, and when necessary have a translator available. Have your disability or special needs accommodated. Be notified if you are the alleged perpetrator in a report of abuse, to be told general information about the report and why an assessment is being conducted. So let's see. If due process of law had occurred and you had a trial, okay, all of this would already be known, and you would have had a chance to speak, and all the information would have been presented, and the jury, the tribunal, would have been able to go over everything and make a decision. Now, not the judge magistrate, like is going on right now in these corrupt courts, where the judge is practicing law from the bench, which is completely unlawful, but you would have your day in court. As you see right here, that's not what's going on. It then says you will have a right to be informed of the outcome of the assessment. Well, isn't that great? So you get to know what they've decided, collecting their information and, you know, using their internal policies and procedures to do so. Yeah, all of it's being done in these back rooms, and people are meeting together, deciding your fate and your family's fate and your children's fate. under the guise of safety and protection. It says you have a right to speak to a supervisor if you have concerns about DHS's actions and participate in developing a safety plan for your child. Okay, so I have a right to speak to a supervisor. What is it going to do to go to the supervisor of this cartel? Okay, they are all in bed together. They do business together daily. They're the supervisors of this caseworker or caseworkers that's coming in. So if I go or you go and speak to a supervisor, who's going to hold this supervisor accountable? And what's going to actually be done? Because they're not working in the best interest of anyone but their for-profit corporation, though that's not what they say. Okay? Then when you go to, you have a right to participate, later on in another video, because I'm going to divide this video into several parts because it's going to get long, you will see that there is immense bullying, intimidation, coercion, and threats, true threats, that are made in order to force parents to comply. And this is a multidisciplinary team. There's many players involved. You have the police that come in and assist, and they intimidate with their presence and their guns, and they stand there. You have the judges, magistrates, the men and women in black robes, okay, sitting behind the bench that are making unlawful summary judgments, okay. The enforcement is there for these for-profit corporations, not for the rights of the people. And that is a huge problem. And when there's no justice being served because they are not following the laws of this land, then many, many innocent people are going to be thrown under the bus. And as late Congresswoman Nancy Schaefer said, you know, the outcome basically is the destruction of the families. And it's all being done for profit. I'm going to end with this short clip because this is real. This is something that parents and whistleblowers often fear, is the retaliation when you expose the corruption and try to get justice. And everyone has to decide where they stand and whose side they're on and make a choice. And that's what it comes down to. And as late Congresswoman Nancy Schaefer said, some things are worth losing over, but we shouldn't be losing anything when we are trying to do what is right and standing on truth.
Mom is in police custody for trying to keep her kids out of state custody. She dodged DCF, but she didn't dodge the cops, and tonight she's talking to 25 for help. Jim Abbott has an exclusive jailhouse interview with a woman who says she was arrested for protecting her kids.
I'm not about to just hand my kids over to them with no findings of abuse, no hotline call, no cause whatsoever.
So Jessica LaVoy decided this time she wouldn't let Florida's Department of Children and Families take her 3 children. She'd rather go to jail.
I'd rather be here than have, just me being here than have 3 kids somewhere where I don't know where they are.
2 years ago, DCF took the 2 children she had at the time after caseworkers said they'd received reports of what they didn't say. But LaVoy says while her 2-year-old was in DCF care, he wound up with several bruises and may have been sexually molested. LaVoy sued DCF, and when caseworkers returned in December to take her kids again, LeBoy figured it was retaliation.
Because they know I have a lawsuit with them and that I'm planning on doing stuff to them. I think that when my name hit the head of the department, that's what triggered this all to come to me like this.
And DCF has gone to 3 of LeBoy's friends as well, taking children from 2 of them. Tammy Young says her daughter is missing. Joanna Rodriguez says her 2 daughters may have head lice. And Heather Carol Lopez, a witness in LeBoy's case, is now being investigated.
Her caseworker had threatened me. That she said, if you don't leave now, then you're going to have problems with your kids.
We tried to talk to DCF about the case, but they refused to comment. Jessica says they've refused to comment to her as well. In fact, they set up a couple hearings at the first trying to take the kids away in December, but never told her about them. She had her first court hearing since being in jail this morning. The judge asked her if she'd tell him where the kids were. She said no.
The judge told me today, he's like, well, if you just tell me where the kids are, we'll leave them where they are. I'm like, I don't believe you. You're not going to give me that in writing. I'm not giving in to anything you say.
LeBoy says she hasn't told anyone where her children are, not even her mother.
To be honest with you, if I did, I wouldn't say. I'm behind my daughter 100%.